Thank you so much, Director, for inviting me to give a talk. Assam's black gold, and black gold is used in different ways, either for the petroleum or for the coal. And in my case today, please excuse me, it is the story of Assam's gold. And when I talk about Assam, I talk about precisely the modern Assam in terms of its geography, in terms of the political importance. You know, as a commodity, coal lacks the glamour in the basket of the historians. No historian normally talks about the coal's history. Not only it is very dirty, cheap, but also less dazzling than its cousin, the petroleum. Coal triggered the Industrial Revolution in Britain, as you all know. In the United States, coal virtually transformed a wilderness into an industrial superpower. Early in the 19th century, when the British East India Company outmustered the Indian rulers to leave behind a long impact on the Indian soil, coal became its most trusted ally. Coal has formed part of the narrative of India's standard economic history, or life and times of the individuals like Dwarakanath Thakur, the master entrepreneur from Bengal, who partnered with the umpire to carve out a space for himself. There is a distinctive case for coal in Assam too. The history of coal in Assam is less contested than the history of tea or the petroleum. The two are the most important imperial ventures of the empire. As early as 1825, during the climax of the Anglo-Burmese War, it was known that Assam would be an important source of coal supply to the British India. Coal was yet to be productively extracted from other parts of the British India. The situation changed very rapidly in the next few years. And in 3/4 of a century, the British Empire maintained a substantial coal mining industry in Assam. Coal was an important source of its political and economic strength for the time being. In the first decade of the 20th century, the British Empire produced roughly 245 million tons of coal. At the same time, the world output of coal was estimated about 545 million tons, of which nearly half was extracted by the United States. Britain was the second country after the US in maintaining a significant access to coal and coal mining. The British made a moderate contribution to the total coal output for the empire, although within British India, Bengal led the total output. By 1882, the total consumption of coal in India amounted to approximately 1.5 million tons, of which about 1/3 was imported from Europe and Australia, and the remaining 2/3 were raised from Indian mines. In 1897, these figures are important to get a sense of what I'm going to tell. There were 145 coal mines that were in operation in British India, of which 128 were located in Bengal. You can understand Bengal's importance in India's coal history. The output from Bengal mines was reported to be almost 3 million tons, and out of which 1 lakh ton were raised from the central provinces, and the rest 1.85 lakhs tons were raised from the Assam collieries. Notwithstanding the importance of coal in the political economy of the British Empire, exploration of coal was more than an issue of imperial economic investment. This talk, divided into 3 sections, deals with the aspects of the geological exploration. You know, the 19th century was also the time of geological science, and the coal played an important role in defining the science at the time. When coal was found in Ranigans in Bengal, the British East India Company was uncertain about the future of coal mining in the British India. New opportunity came when the Lieutenant R. Wilcox, he was a military lieutenant who had a fair training in geology, visited various parts of eastern Assam in the 3rd decade of the 19th century. These British officials knew the power of coal. Many of them were born and brought up in the coal fields of Britain themselves. Wilcox's finding was sufficient enough to allow David Scott, who was the first commissioner of the newly occupied region, to suggest that the coal would help to introduce steam navigation to Assam, a region otherwise difficult to reach via the Brahmaputra, because it used to take almost 60 days of time to travel from Calcutta to Guwahati at that time, and coal turned out to be the most opportune agency for reducing this distance. Further investigation resulted in confirmation that the coal bed existed in both Upper Assam and the Khasi Hills. Wilcox was followed by Charles Bruce, famously the tea explorer, in 1828, who also found evidences of coal. The persuasive factor was the discovery of a shale limestone in the Sylhet and the Khasi Hills. Further discoveries of the shale limestone in parts of central Brahmaputra Valley was exciting news for the East India Company officials and formed the basis for the discovery of more coal beds in the decades to come. Officials were optimistic regarding the capacity to export coal from that region, as the most probable sites of coal beds were conveniently located and near the river and was easily accessible. East India Company officials' experience of the navigability in Assam was relatively very poor. Until the middle of the century, 19th century, bulk transportation of goods from the region was very low. There was very little experience of dealing with goods carriers in that region. Nonetheless, easy access would make these and other constraints insignificant, and hence the emphasis on the coal story. In the meantime, the Bengal government also granted a paltry sum for the purpose of a coal mine in Assam. It was also the time when Dwarkanath Tagore was doing a lot of business in the coal in Raniganj area. Coal discovery in Assam was a matter of some importance for the London investors. That coal had been found at separate points, along with an extended line of landscape, resulted in consideration to providing better support to the region in terms of financial investment. Most of the London newspapers in the 1830s, they began to report about the new discoveries of coal in that region. Discussion revolved around the issue of making the region practically useful development. Preliminary examination of a specimen sent by Jenkins to London led to the mixed reactions. An official, a Dr. MacLeod, was hopeful that a further investigation would lead to the encouraging result of future trade in the coal in the near future. When Jenkins became very impressed with the early success, he ensured that several geographical areas be examined thoroughly. At that time, most of the geologists or these administrators, they really did not have enough mechanisms or tools or instruments to go deeper. They were just exploring the surface, the minerals. The question of supply of coal from Assam was again reported by a committee in Calcutta in 1845. The committee expressed its hope that perhaps the most important results from opening coal mines in Assam for the supply to the Gangetic steamers until more convenient sources should become better known than at present would consist in the assurance of an unlimited and steady supply at all seasons. The committee was of the view that in the near future, coal would emerge as a major source of capital investment for the British investors in Assam. The next crucial step was taken by the Geological Survey of India in 1865. Henry Benedict Medlicott, he was a deputy superintendent of the Geological Survey of India. He carried out another survey of Assam in search of coal fields. His survey did not result in discovering any new coal fields, but reaffirmed the economic value of two existing coal fields at Tirap and Jaipur. These are the places that the coal was more important for. It took a long period of survey. This is the story. You might be getting bored, but it took longer time for the investors, for the scientists, for the geologists to be convinced about the quality of the coal. They did not do it on one single day. Renewed surveys were again conducted between 1874 and 1876. This was also the time of the birth of a science, the geological science. Otherwise, it could have been done in a very short period of time. Meanwhile, speculative interest in Assam's coal increased. A number of applications seeking grants to take lease of the territories, which are supposed to be full of coal, waited for official confirmations, which came at the initiative of the Geological Survey of India. And task was given to the Geological Survey of India for the future superintendent F.R. Mallet. F.R. Mallet made extensive physical surveys of various places which were identified by various explorers as possible sources of where Assam's coal could be found. His primary range of investigation was the southern hill ranges of Assam. Mallet's report indicated two important issues. Mallet concluded that coal found in most places had low ash quality, which was accepted as good for use, and meant that coal mining in Assam posed immense commercial possibility. You know, this was the time when petroleum was yet to be explored. There was no investment for petroleum. Petroleum investment would wait till 1880s. Mallet advocated financial investment to explore this coal deposit. This is the important point, that till that time there was no financial investment coming out either from the private investors or the government investments. He estimated that the total volume of coal deposits in eastern Assam to be at some 9 million tons, which was quite amazing. His report also provided practical guidance for extracting coal and ways of revenue management involved therein. In fact, most of the local geologists, they had very limited understanding of how to extract the coal. Their parents, their family members might have some experience of coal extractions, but back at here in Assam, they had very, very minimum textual understanding of the practical work. Within a decade, private speculation came forward without bringing mass investment. Early speculation resulted in a mixed fate. The numbers were low. Competing interest in the region, such as oil, helped to dilute the potential investment. The government, meanwhile, imposed conditions for allowing leases. Despite high number of applications, the government doubted whether many speculators would take the lease, actually, creating concern that monopoly trade would result at the time. By 1880s, it became very clear that the European speculators had schemed to wrest control of the coal resources and trade in Assam. Unlike the Bengali zamindars' entry into the coal trade in Bengal, circumstances persisted in which potential wealthy Assamese bakers evinced no interest in the coal trade. This failure could be largely attributed to the absence of an Assamese bourgeoisie at the time. A similar fate happened to the tea industry. While a small number of Assamese petty bourgeois showed interest in the tea industry, this never became a success. The most cited example is that of Moniram Datta Borua, the prime minister of the Ahom kingdom. Borua was hanged for conspiring from Calcutta in the Sepoy Mutiny. Prior to this, he established 2 small tea plantations, gaining experience as a manager of the Assam Tea Company. This failure is largely ascribed to the imperial politics of the time. The Assamese gentry began to benefit from the liberal land policy to reclaim land only towards the last years of the 19th century. However, this did not endow them with enough capital or the political leverage to challenge the European company's control over the mineral or the other resources, which should have established them as a future entrepreneurs. Demand for coal increased slowly within the province in the next few years. For fuel, the tea gardens were dependent on either coal brought up from the Bengal collieries or timber procured inexpensively from the region. The Dumduma tea factory bought some 3,000 mons of coal from Bengal after ferrying it 1,000 miles. Mallet estimated that the cost of coal thus arrived was 10 times higher than the coal mined in Bengal. The newly formed Assam Railway and the Trading Company, it was the most well-known, the joint stock company at the time. They capitalized on the condition of a very slow and yet highly speculative local market, functioning in a similar way to the existing tea garden companies. The ARTC maintained dual trade interest, exploration and trade of coal and the railway together. Capital was raised through public auction of its share in the London market. In 1881, the Assam Railway and Trading Company acquired concessions to explore several coal fields. In the next year, the company commissioned the Lidu Colliery. The company had a combined interest in building and opening railways in this area too, which soon became a major factor in promoting the coal trade. Coal extraction gained momentum very slowly. In 1885, the ARTC produced 75,000 tons annually, as a result far less substantial than the Bengal coal fields. Despite shareholders in London investing in the ARTC, the success of the coal market remained a major concern. the tea industry remained a major possible customer, yet not everybody was enthusiastic about the future of the coal trade in Assam. London's Railway Times, a newspaper, published a skeptical note on the grim future of coal of the ARTC. It suggested that the coal from Assam would not be able to compete with the low-priced, high-quality coal from Bengal, and there was no extensive local market in Assam for coal, despite possible increase in demand for the tea industry. The journal further argued that the total requirement from the tea gardens was far below than what could possibly be explored in the province. Private investment poured in, and within a short period of time, an estimated £1 million was spent for the coal investors. This coincided with the intensive petroleum exploration, private investment in acquiring land leases also. ARTC's mineral concession gave exploration of coal and its trade a formal character. The prospect for coal mining grew abundantly at this moment. The company acquired 4 separate collieries. It began to excavate coal effectively by use of a system that relied on a shallow inclination, then popular for working. Alongside the increasing trade in coal, drilling for oil was about to gain ground. The advent of the oil exploration facilitated the technological collaboration as well as negotiation with the government for acquiring farm lease rights. Meanwhile, the land laws in the province quickly underwent significant changes. The province had been primarily endowed with the ryotary system from the 1860s. However, the new regulation of 1886, it entrusted the ownership of mineral resources to the government, making it easier for the government and the private speculators to negotiate leases on a long-term basis. Over the years, the gradual mechanization and the importation to Assam mining of the British technology, the introduction of railway carts and the haulways ponies replaced dependence on the manual labor. The coal trade also improved due to government support and a developing of a new import market. Coal now began to be imported from Assam to Bengal. From an estimated 16,000 tons in 1884, the ARTC's coal output grew to a modest 2 lakh tons in 1899, you can see from the previous slide. The high quality of the region's coal was now feted and it was speculated. Black Diamond, a London-based coal periodical, announced that coal from Assam was an excellent steam coal and undoubtedly the best found in India, its calorific value being considerably higher than any other than known Indian coal. It cooked freely, the coke being of excellent quality. Speculators and the engineers alike agreed that Assam coal could be described as highly bituminous. It was very soft, caked freely when burned, and its practical taste was found to be equal to the British coal. Population is certainly scanty, but then it is composed of a class of peoples, Mikirs, Kasaris, who can be taught, will willingly put their hands to anything that will afford them a moderate remuneration for their labor. However, unlike the tea industry, the trouble did not surface for a long period of time because the coal did not require massive labor employment. Meanwhile, the tea industry had put in place means of overcoming this crisis, as which is a very familiar story, which hardly found any support in the press and the public discourse. Nevertheless, its approaches helped the future coal industry, which relied on similar mechanisms. The coal speculators' attention was drawn to a number of local communities which could be encouraged in the works of coal extraction and the clearance of jungles. Most early attempts were unsuccessful, resulting in public disquiet throughout the coal industry. George Turner, an influential engineer in the ARTC, condemned the Naga population whose habitat covered the landscape earmarked for future coal mining. Turner's condemnation towards the local population for their disregard for mine work was no different from the previous attitude of the tea industry owners towards the Assamese peasantry. However, the coal industry at a much earlier stage in the development. The tea industry had already fairly developed. Labor was imported from the Bengal province. In terms of their social background, the new workers at Assam Colliery were no different from their tea industry background counterparts. Extraction began with the help of the Naga workmen. The company considered them as having the requisite expertise in clearing dense and hard jungles. However, it was discouraged in their attempts to secure technical and methodological contact from these workers in extracting coal with minimum damage to the product. The simplest alternative was to procure preliminary support from a small number of the British collieries. So the British laborers arrived in Assam by the 1880s. Bringing workers from the other parts of the world did not resolve the crisis. Work at the collieries required training to develop various indispensable skills. One way of resolving this crisis was to train the Indian workforce under the European supervision. For many workers, the work experience was different from everyday life. They needed to work underground, rarely had any exposure to such work for the most of the would-be laborers. In making choices in labor recruitment, the coal industry preferred to use similar methods to those of the tea industries. Accepted tools and methods for work became the new bone of contention. Bengal-trained miners preferred to work using a crowbar, known as sabul, and pointed at both the ends for cutting the coal. The management instead sought the use of double-ended pick, increasingly used in British market. It was difficult to force the Bengal workers to use another tool for extracting coal. The industry argued that easiest alternative would be trained the non-skilled workers. Years later, the industry boasted that how this was done, and there would be now hundreds of native workers working in the mines, careful, good workmen who were agriculturalists a few years before. Workmen arrived from Britain also at the same time. The industry employed both men and women. The man would be cutting and getting and the coal and timbering, etc., while the women would be filling the tubs and the tramming, etc. Working conditions in the collieries invited criticisms, resulted in the gradual improvement of wages and conditions for the miners for the years. Since the last decade of the 19th century, the industry began to engage a sizable number of Nepali workers who were recruited from the foothills of Nepal and above. The industry and its European masters increasingly extolled the ability of the Nepalese as a skilled workforce compared to the others from the eastern and the central India. Slowly, other emerging mineral-based industries also began to recruit the Nepali workers. The total number of workers at the collieries never exceeded a few thousands compared to the millions in the tea plantation. This number was much smaller than the workforce employed by the tea industry, or those who migrated to the western district of Assam to expand the jute cultivation for the need of the Bengal jute factories. The tea industries maintained a very highly rigid labor socialization regime, which greatly benefited their relations with the local peasant populations. The collieries did not differ, but with a tiny populations, they did not significantly influence the demographic fabric of the province. However, the industry as a whole had already begun to push the tribal populations living in the neighborhood to coal miners or to more distant places. Since the late 19th century, use of mineral resources has increased exponentially in the British India. In Assam, the coal lost its relevance because it was a very labor-intensive technique. It formally disappeared from Assam in the early 20th century. Now, newly found minerals found importance in the social organization of this mineral production. Coal's importance was reinforced not only by private speculators, but also by its ability to answer to the local demand. Significantly, the confluence of coal with the steam locomotion and steel production throughout the industrializing world also played an important role in boosting the prospect of coal production in the colonial time. However, the human and the environmental cost and the practical challenges of coal mining have always caused setbacks to the industry. Very little was discussed in general literature regarding the possible environmental consequences of coal mining of the 20th century. Not only did the Hours for Development refuse a space for such discussion, but ecological change was yet to be addressed as a serious issue in the academia or in the public domain in the 19th century. For example, when millions of timbers were cut down, nobody took notice of the tea planters' massive damage to the local ecology. By the time such consideration began to emerge, serious and irreversible damage was already in commonplace. By the end of the previous century, it became well known that coal mining caused significant harm to waterways by increasing the level of sedimentary heavy metals. There was report of degradation of land cover, unfavorable habitat, condition for plants and animals. Many plants disappeared, many animals disappeared. Unfavorable habitats became a major concern. Substantial decrease in the number of trees and the shrub species. The conversion of agricultural fields into the mining areas, the loss of dense forest areas, and simultaneous increase in open forest areas. All these were major concerns. Many studies have shown that possible loss of nutrients in the soil and their subsequent impact on the agriculture. Water bodies near the coal mines became highly acidic. Such acidic waters failed to support aquatic life, and many fish species disappeared by the early 20th century. After independence, the coal industry was largely nationalized. In 1957, Assam produced only 1.3% of the total coal output of India. In 1973, Assam Railway and Trading Corporation, which was the only coal speculator in that region, transferred its leads and operations to the newly created nationalized Northeastern Coalfield Limited. Several pre-existing Marwari trading houses, whose interest was confined to grain trade or money lending, they have come to play an important role in the coal distribution. Assam's coal share within independent India's total output was very small, but at the same time, it became one of the most contested political commodity, raising hope for Assam's economic prosperity. In 2011, the Assamese press reported increasing interest expressed by the members of the United Liberation Front of Assam, ALPHA, the political insurgents who had critiqued the Indian government for exploiting Assam economically and having a continued colonial policies in asserting control over the coal trade. They wanted full control over the collieries. In this talk, I could not speculate the future of this political and cultural desire of the Assamese ultranationalists to wrest control of the coal trade from the state and the government. Rather, let me conclude this talk by saying that this desire constitutes a broader reflection on how the imperial economy created an institution of mineral exploitation, in this case coal, too far from the local institution, which remains sustainable or profitable. Since its inception in Assam, the coal economy had failed to inspire Assam's residents to galvanize the surrounding agrarian economy, and probably it will continue to do so. Thank you so much.